Hi, Dr. Benke. I want to thank you first for joining me today to take a few minutes to talk about the U01 grant and kind of give the community an update. We started this started talking about it in 2019, officially started, I think, in 2020. We're fortunate enough to get a U01 grant, and I think we're approaching the last year of that now. And it's been a fun ride so far. You want to talk a little bit about what your biggest learnings have been?
So let's talk about why we were doing this. And
Okay.
that will kind of, I think, reframe the what the biggest learnings were. The whole goal is that we want to be ready, and it will define what that means for clinical trials for CDKL5 disorder. And yes, we've had a bunch of trials for CDKL5 already. A bunch, we know that's not that many, but it's more than a lot of other rare diseases. But what we knew from a number of studies is that it wasn't just seizures that was important to families. And so if we were going to be clinical trial ready, it meant that we had to be able to measure what was important to families that would potentially change with an intervention in a clinical trial. Because we wanted, if we're going to say we have a new therapy, the first question is well, what did it improve and by how much? And oh, by the way, how safe is it? That's another story. But this whole grant is how can we be clinical trial ready for CDKL5 disorder? And so the whole point is let's develop the tools to measure what's important for families. Now, our hypothesis is that the off the shelf tools, and it's like off the shelf kind of behind me here. What is off the shelf tools? Are they useful or not? And our thought is that they're not useful just based on what we knew from working with families already. And these are like you could literally pull them off the shelf and use them. So we wanted to develop new measures for CDKL5 disorder. And in order to do that, that whole process involves a very rich relationship with families with CDKL5 disorder, because there has to be this dialogue back and forth about, if you're going to ask me a question, well, what does that question mean? Is it really important to you? How do we make the question such that it's as simple and as effective and useful as possible? So, what was the question? What have we learned?
What were your biggest learnings? I want
What
to
are
make
our,
just a brief comment. I think for me, one of the things that was so shocking is actually how hard it is to create a new measure. It is it is a big lift.
honestly, that is my biggest learning. I think everybody else, especially my colleagues who are just amazing at the Kids Institute in Australia, they already knew this was the case. But I learned so much from them about how hard this is to do. You can't just make up a bunch of questions. And you'll probably remember, Karen, that's what we did initially. That was our first paper that came out of one of the forum meetings, is to develop some measures. So we just kind of came up with a bunch of questions, but we had to kind of throw something on paper first. But then we went through this specific process of working with families, and I realized how hard it is to come up with a decent questionnaire. And that's kind of that other thing that I think that we want to talk about is, what is a decent questionnaire? And a decent questionnaire is not my opinion. It's not your opinion or the family's opinion. Everything that we've done has been peer reviewed by the broader community outside of CDKL5 disorder to say, yes, check, you've done this, you've done that, all of the boxes, you've done everything right to develop an outcome measure that's new and reliable and really measures what you think that you want to measure.
And that someone else can pick up and get the same type of results. That someone
Exactly.
else can administer in a controlled way to get the same results. So if you have a study that's going on in 10 different locations, you know it's being done the same in all 10 locations.
And that's the part of clinical trial readiness. We wanted all of our sites, where most of our families with CDKL5 disorder are, is that they then now know how to administer these measures, but we have now the experience and a lot of the tools to teach more sites how to do this. And kind of the other piece of that is that now that we've published, and I just added it up, we're 13 and we've got two more papers that we're working on. These papers are, and the reason why papers are important is that industry and the FDA can see when we say, oh, we're using this outcome measure or whatever, and it works. It's not just our word. It's like, here's peer-reviewed literature that says that the measure that we're using works and it's valid for CDKL5 disorder. So we're not just publishing papers just to publish papers. We're publishing papers to make us clinical trial ready.
Yeah, and that matters as well. One of the things I've learned is because when industry's looking, if they have a treatment, especially when that's going to change the picture of the disease and not one symptom, they want to know that they can accurately measure it and show that it worked or it didn't work. And you can't do that if you don't have a tool to show it.
So looking at in terms of learning, so I think one of the things that I think was really interesting for me is that we were not only able to come up with these different measures, and we've come up with a new measure for language, which is so important to families about it's not just verbal, it's all these other ways of communicating non-verbally, which we think we've come up with a way of actually measuring it. This is, great work from Jenny Downs and her team, is that again, working together with all of the sites is that we've got all of these different measures. We've also found that we can consolidate them into one number. And I call it the mega model, but basically and everybody wants to know, what is my number? How severe am I? But everybody is a little bit different of severity of different things, but we figured out how to put it into a number. And we think this is something that the FDA wants, is they want you to have a number, because it's easy for them to understand. Oh, you're a 20 and now you've improved and now you're a 60. Ah, that's big. We can understand that. So that's been a big learning. And the other thing that's been big is that we can correlate that number to what we're calling a biomarker. A biomarker is something that it's external from a questionnaire. It's external from me doing an exam. It's the EEG. You just look at what's on the EEG and it correlates with your number. And that I didn't think that we could do it. Dr. Eric Morse thought all along, oh yeah, we could do this. And he was right.
It's
We could
been
do it.
fascinating to me to see that kind of grow and be formed into something concrete, and to see how so many of these measures correlate together and move and shift together. It's interesting. And a number is what they want. That's why they want us to count seizures so much, right? It's a number. It's something they think is easy, which is really not. It's hard, but that's why I think they like it so much, because it's a number and it either goes up or it goes down.
Just to point out another thing, we couldn't make all of these numbers work and come together if we didn't have so many families doing all of these questionnaires multiple times. It really is a numbers game. And actually we've blown away the FDA and our other peers in academia with how supportive and involved everybody has been in this whole project, because it wouldn't have worked if we didn't have everybody doing what they're doing. And
that is a big kudos to our families. All the
huge.
parents who keep doing it, keep taking the videos. I need to finish mine up today from my last visit. The community has really supported this. This is their project. It wouldn't have happened without them. And I try all the time to thank people for this, and I know you all do as well. We couldn't have done it without the buy-in from the community. And that's why it was important to me to have even this conversation, just a few minutes to update kind of where we are, where we're going, what you've learned, and And what's been the most surprising? We've covered a little bit, but is there anything else that stands out from what you've learned from some of these measures that you didn't expect to see or learn that was surprising?
So the way the grant was structured is our first 2 years was to develop and make sure that the measures worked. And then our last 3 years was to implement them over 2 years. So there's kind of, to find 2 contiguous years in those final 3 years. And one of the things that we're doing is we're getting kind of a sense of what natural history study looks like. But just keep that in mind. Okay, hang on. Natural history study over 2 years. And it's just a small amount of time. But one of the interesting things is that we can start to look at natural history over this 2 year chunk. And one of the things that's really interesting is we know that development happens with CDKL5 disorder, but we can see it with our measures. And I think that that's really interesting and surprising. And it's also important to know what that looks like so that when you're doing a trial, you can say, this is what we would normally expect in terms of development. And where do we see development? And so that we can, again, improve our clinical trial readiness. Now, I didn't think that 2 years was long enough, but it's telling us that we are getting some important information. But it kind of segues into where we need to go with this is that even though the U01 funding is going to stop January 31st, 2026, we need to figure out how to carry on doing this. Not at the same rate, because we know we're going to poop everybody out, but we could still get a lot of good history, natural history, by doing the same things that we're doing, but just at a different pace.
And we can also curate that carefully, right? And really
Yes,
choose what is clear and that we know has value so that we're being as respectful of
oh,
everyone's effort as possible, which I know you all have done that all along. Um,
absolutely. No, we've really put it to families and they've delivered, but I think that going forward, we can figure out what is really needed to kind of fill in the gaps with natural history study. The
and
the FDA is going to want this. Industry really wants this. We really
right.
want this.
And I think, our hope, and I think you would agree with this, is that we can correlate some long-term data collection beyond the 2 years with our existing centers of excellence in collecting those data in those visits.
Absolutely. I think we've figured out how to do it as part of the visits, and the families certainly know. They get an email. Oh yeah, I got to fill out another set of questionnaires. Oh boy, I'm going to get some more reminders from Helen and Jenny about doing some videos.
Yes, yes. But it takes all of us, right? It takes
It
the work
does.
from all of us,
Yes.
and that's why it's moving forward. So what would you say is most important that you still need from the community?
So for this last year, please just do those last sets of questionnaires. It's so important that when you get the reminder, you get it. Just do your best and get it done. I know that they've got a lot more going on than what we're talking about here, but as much as they can to just help us finish off the year strong. When you get those email reminders to either come in or fill out your questionnaires, please help us get it done. We're so close, and we know that um, we're going to hopefully finish up most of our data collection over the next several months. But then this leaves us only a few months left to finish off the analysis before this whole thing wraps up in terms of funding. We imagine that there's still going to be some analysis that goes on afterwards, but it's our sweat equity the same way that families have had their sweat equity to get these
Yeah.
forms
Just
filled
to
out.
just dig in for that endurance to push through to the finish line, right?
Dig in.
So there's a lot of concern right now with the current things that are going on, right, with NIH and FDA and funding. And so I wanted to just give you an opportunity to share with us maybe what do these NIH potential cuts or cuts actually mean for this study specifically?
So the way the federal government works is if you pass a new budget, then the NIH has that budget to dole out their money across projects. And if they've already made a commitment to a project, then they will fund you at that what that commitment was for that particular year. When you're operating under a continuing resolution, which is what Congress passed last week, then all of your budgets are cut by 10%. And because the continuing resolution was passed is that NIH is probably going to have even less money this year. So a continuing resolution means you get the same money this year as you had last year. But because of how things are going, they have even less money this coming year than they did last year. So the way NIH usually operates is if they're under a continuing resolution, which they have been for the last couple of years, is your budget gets cut automatically by 10%. If they have the money to restore that cut, they will give it back to you. Last year, we were cut by 10%, but they had enough money to make the cut only 2.5%. Because we had money during a previous year, during COVID, when we didn't do as much as we wanted to do just because we couldn't, because of that, plus some of the restoration, is we were able to operate last year at full strength, which was exactly what we needed. But this year, we've been cut by 10%. It's not going to come back. We don't have any money from prior years to make up the deficit. What that deficit means to us is it's $80,000, okay? Plus the indirect costs, but it's $80,000. And $80,000, when you think about it, doesn't sound like a lot, but it's really one person spread across all of our sites. And that's just one less person helping you carry the buckets in the fire brigade to the fire. Think about it that way.
Right. So has an impact, not detrimental. We want to be clear. This is moving forward and we're going to get it across the finish line, but it does have an impact. And I think for some of our families are advocating and reaching out to their representatives. And I think this is a good example for them to take and say, it is impacting a rare disease project specific to our diagnosis. And like you said, maybe doesn't sound like a whole lot, but it's a body basically, right? That's doing all of the, whether it's data analysis or hurting our cats a little bit, right? It just makes it a little more challenging.
Yep, all of the above.
But the good news is it wasn't cut completely, right? I mean, we get at least we can get it across the finish line and we can keep on keeping on.
Yes, we are going to get, it was never going to be a Porsche that ran across the finish line. But we are going to get across the finish line and we're going to do well, look good doing it.
Yeah, and we're just all looking forward to just knowing that we've done this, and then I think the exciting part will be when we get to actually use these in a trial one day, right?
We're
That's the
hopeful.
hope.
We're
That's the
hopeful.
hope. Well, thank you so much for your dedication to us, Dr. Benke. Plus your time, you go above and beyond, even things like this. It's time for you to be off and you're sitting here recording this with me for our community. But I think that you all are willing to do that because you see our community pour in as well.
Well, Karen, thank you. We certainly couldn't have done any of this without your help and support. I mean, you got us off the ground while we were trying to get NIH funding, just and how much families have been there for us as we've gone through with this. And we appreciate you herding the cats, getting us out there to do it, meeting with us at the different meetings where we went through, how to operationalize this and whether or not the questions were good or not good. Anyway, everything that you and the community have done has been instrumental, and we thank you as well.
Thank you. I think we all make a great team, the entire group. Okay, thank you, Tim. Appreciate you.
Take care.